Hey everyone, I just got back from a cruise with my family and I wanted to know your opinion on cruises. Story 1. I guess they are just not for me. Not my idea of relaxing. The last thing I want from a vacation is to be trapped in the middle of the ocean, crammed into a huge ship full of thousands of people, and given strict timelines on port stops. Story 2. Some people love cruise ships, some hate cruise ships. I hate cruise ships. There are too many people and stops are tourist attractions. I just don't feel they are relaxing, which is what I want in a vacation. I want my vacation to be on my family's schedule, so cruises are not for me. Story 3. If you prefer staying in the hotel when you go on vacation, they are perfect. Obviously, they are not for me. I like to mix with the locals when I go on vacation. Story 4. My parents like them, but they also seem to return from each one with some kind of cold or stomach illness. Story 5. I would rather take a stick in the eye than go on a cruise. I had panic attacks in Hawaii because I knew that I was on an island in the middle of the ocean. A giant boat with thousands of people and germs everywhere? No thanks. Story 6. I have both enjoyed cruises and disliked them historically. I have been on 6. I would say the balance is about 50-50. We took our children on one last year on Royal Caribbean for 4 days in the Bahamas. It was a great time, especially the 2 days we spent at their private island, Coco Cay. We had so much fun as a family, and it was by far the most relaxing cruise I have ever been on. We stayed in an overwater bungalow for 2 days, and it was bliss. My fiancé and I went on a very expensive 7-day cruise on Celebrity 5 years ago. It was very relaxing and nice. The food was decent, the amenities were very good, and it was not super crowded. 3 of the cruises I have taken were absolutely not worth it and only partially enjoyable. I find that most cruises have terrible food, overpriced everything, and do not provide much in the way of a rewarding experience when visiting other countries. The ports are almost always pure tourist traps, and the cost of getting out and doing legitimate experiences is incredibly high when combined with the cost of the cruise. Overall, cruises are not my favorite method of vacation. I do not hate them, but I vastly prefer all-inclusive resorts and less centralized experiences. My family tends to agree as well. We offered another cruise trip to our 3 sons or a direct trip to Mexico to a resort, and they did not hesitate to choose the resort trip over the cruise. Story 7. I do not know your family, so it is hard for me to have an opinion about them. As far as cruises go, I have never tried one because the nightmare experiences people post about online outweigh the positive experiences. I am not saying there are more negative experiences, but the idea of being stuck is very concerning. Story 8. I've been on one. It was okay, but not my thing. The good parts were waking up somewhere new after traveling overnight. Being on a ship with a group of people I ran into several times, and decent accommodations. It sort of reminded me of Welcome Week in university. The entertainment was okay, just okay. The bad parts were feeling a bit trapped, mediocre experiences started to feel like good ones, and just feeling like I was invading various islands without actually experiencing the local culture. It all felt made up, about as real as the country shops at Disney or the mini Eiffel Tower in Las Vegas. It's just not real. Would I ever go on another one? Probably not, but never say never. Story 9. I always thought cruises would not be for me, but my wife wanted to go on a 3-week Mediterranean cruise, and I loved every second of it. We have been on 5 to 6 more since. Story 10. I was very much against them. However, we went on a Disney cruise a few years ago, and it was amazing. It was expensive but really well done. Story 11. From what I have heard, they pollute significantly, similar to how cruise ships in Europe pollute 4 times as much as all cars in Europe combined. Sometimes, illegal activities occur by exploiting laws in international waters, such as drug trafficking and deaths at sea. The experience itself is pleasant, offering resort-like amenities with a nice change of scenery. Depending on the cruise, there may be stops at tourist spots. Story 12. Went on a 14-night Caribbean cruise for my honeymoon. My wife loves beach holidays. She wants to fly somewhere sunny, book into an all-inclusive resort on the beach, and do nothing for a week. That drives me nuts. I want to go and experience new places and different cultures, visit interesting sites, museums, and so on. It was an excellent compromise. She got the all-inclusive experience, plus she got to relax by the pool on sea days or when we were not getting off the ship. I got to see new places and do activities. It really was the best of both worlds. We have booked another cruise for next year, this time 10 days in the Mediterranean. Story 13. The only way I vacation is by bringing my family on a Royal Caribbean cruise every February. I have experienced all-inclusive resorts but prefer cruising. I am aware of the environmental impacts and do my part to avoid wasting food, energy, and water to the best of my ability. Story 14. Kids like cruises, and I understand why. They can be a relatively good deal and are very easy. However, two things will keep me from ever doing them again. First, pollution. Research it. It is shocking how much pollution is generated. Second, the people working on these ships are not given basic workers' rights. This is also quite shocking. Some governments, such as the Philippines, even have agreements to pre-resolve issues like dismemberment of their workers for set dollar amounts. It is really terrible for the average worker. Additionally, the laws surrounding these ships allow a lot of leeway in what can be enforced and how. I am done with cruises. I am not really a cruise person by culture either. Story 15. My wife and I, both retired, have been on several European river cruises with Viking. Their boats are small, with fewer than 200 guests. We are scheduled for an ocean cruise with them around the British Isles next year. Their ocean liners carry fewer than 1,000 guests. Most people I have seen on their cruises are over age 40. Their demographic caters to adults. In fact, no one under 18 is allowed. I am thankful for that. I cannot imagine trying to relax and enjoy a cruise with 5,000 people, including noisy children and rowdy young teenagers. Yes, I am a grumpy old man, but that is why I sail with a company that caters to my demographic. In short, we love to cruise in a calm and relaxing atmosphere with people like us. Story 16. It does not appeal to me. When I travel, I prefer to go off the beaten track. You do not get that on a cruise. A good friend goes on one about every 2 years with the entire extended family. They see it as family time. Not for me. We do our reunions by renting 2 beach condos or cabins on a lake. 1 cabin and 2 campers provide enough room for everyone. Story 17. Not a fan. Everything is on a schedule. The stops are never long enough, and the time ashore is never long enough. That being said, if you consider the boat as the vacation and there might be a bit of sightseeing along the way, then they are okay. I have traveled a lot. I always learn some of the local language, like to spend days or weeks in a location and try to avoid tourist areas. The cruises are the exact opposite of how I like to travel. Story 18. I have been an avid cruiser for almost a decade. I love them. The trick is to be loyal to one brand. Our first cruise 10 years ago was on the maiden voyage of the Carnival Vista. Because it was a brand new ship, they went all in on the entertainment and onboard activities. The excursions were great. Sadly, Carnival has been in sharp decline in terms of quality. Our ship Vista has had to undergo some repairs since we last saw her. Norwegian Cruise Line is our ride or die. We have gone on several trips with them. They offer many rebate offers, upgrades, and membership deals. Often, the trips are to the same ports. There is always something different to do, but it gets repetitive. The same goes for onboard activities. If you have seen one, you have seen them all. When you get the chance to visit a good port, take it. The highlight of our trips has been visiting the Mayan ruins. The best thing about Norwegian Cruise Line is that you can put money down towards future cruises, making the total cost much more affordable. People like me can actually travel without breaking the bank. Royal Caribbean is our second choice. Great ships and lots of fun entertainment, such as shows. The onboard activities are lacking unless you book passage on one of the bigger ships, like Icon of the Seas. Excursion prices were somewhat expensive. There are others like Virgin Voyages, Princess Cruises, and similar lines. Those are lower tier. Conclusion. The right cruise line will determine how much you enjoy it. Norwegian Cruise Line is the way to go. And all that, I feel trapped, I can't get out nonsense people say about cruising is just that. Nonsense. Story 19. I would rather stay at an all-inclusive resort. It is potentially cheaper and I want to sit by the beach at night. Story 20. Overweight people getting drunk and eating unhealthy food as if there is no tomorrow. Overworked staff hired from developing countries working like slaves. Disney cruises are particularly known for exploiting people from developing countries. The American Dream. Story 21. I am in agreement with the late David Foster Wallace in his essay, A Supposedly Fun Thing I Will Never Do Again. Story 22. Never been on a cruise before and do not ever plan to. Not hating on anyone who enjoys cruises, but I would lose my goddamn mind. Story 23. I go on multiple cruises a year. They are wonderful. Easy, you unpack once and you are in a different place every day. There's plenty to do while you are on board, and you meet people from all around the world. It is a great time. Story 24. I have been on one and loved it. I recommend staying an extra day or two before or after the trip to explore the city you are departing from, especially if it is different from the city you live in. Story 25. I have an opinion, but I have never made one. I cannot be objective. It seems to me that being with several thousand people on a boat, where you eat excessively from morning to evening, is not a style of vacation that I like. Story 26. The only thing I would be interested in is all-you-can-eat food for multiple days. I will destroy their plumbing. Mark my words, that is the goal. However, I can do this on land for cheaper. Story 27. I've been on a few and did not enjoy them. There is no freedom to explore. It feels like being on a leash, only allowed to go out for a few hours or they leave without you. I prefer to travel with complete freedom. Story 28. I really enjoyed a Disney cruise I took with my wife and family a few years ago. It was a seriously large bill, but everyone still talks about it. 10 out of 10 experience. I will do it again someday. My wife wants to do it annually. I think we might be able to afford it once a decade for now. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. Story 29. Some girl took me on a cruise once. I was bored after 2 days. It felt like a floating old-age home with drunk people on board. I ended up playing volleyball with the Italian crew members. So, not my cup of tea. Story 30. I have never been on one, and it does not really appeal to me. It sounds like a floating shopping mall. Story 31. The girlfriend and I also just got back from one last week. It was my first time. Overall, it was an enjoyable experience. I would do it again someday. Story 32. When I am on holiday, I sleep in the hotel and spend the rest of the time exploring. Being stuck on a floating hotel does not really appeal to me. I know you can get off at each port and explore, but I have seen how predatory tour companies are around cruise guests as soon as they step off the boat. A lot of people enjoy cruises, though. Story 33. We really enjoy them. It always depends on your destination, though. Everything on the ship is usually an awesome experience. With everything included, you can't beat the pricing since you can sometimes get tickets for the ship at very low prices. It also depends on the time of year that you go. Story 34. Meh. I have been on one and did not enjoy it. They just are not for me. My parents have been on several and love them. Story 35. Very indifferent. I would never spend any money on it, but if someone were going to pay my way completely to go on a cruise, I would probably go along without much enthusiasm. Story 36. Why would I ever want to be trapped on a massive boat with a questionable maintenance history and poor cleaning, surrounded by a large number of generally sick people? None of that sounds appealing. Story 37. I used to work for a cruise line, and I found the entire concept to be superficial. You are usually only in a given port for the day, long enough to visit international shops, Starbucks, and a token cultural event or location near the cruise terminal, then off to overeat while watching mediocre entertainment. I became good at getting away from the ports and finding the authentic places I was visiting, but it required experience and some risk, such as missing the boat and losing your job. If you have eaten at a Chinese buffet, you do not really know what China is like. That is how cruise tourism is. Story 38. I love cruises. I also love going to a place naturally and experiencing the culture. Cruises are not like that. Cruises are fun, surrounded by the ocean, stopping at several places briefly rather than staying in one place. No planning is required besides booking the ticket. They are also very social. I have taken about 4 to 5 cruises in my life, and I always make at least one friend I stay in touch with. Story 39. Only for elderly or wealthy individuals. It can be very boring if you have limited financial resources since everything requires money. Story 40. Ugh, I don't mind, but it's just expensive. My sister and I want to go to Mexico. We have been to South America, Europe, Africa, and Asia. We've been everywhere except Mexico. 10 days in a Tulum resort costs $6,000. A similar trip on a cruise costs $11,000. A cruise is not my first choice of vacation. Story 41. Different strokes for different folks. Avoid cruises that tend to attract the drinking crowd. Tourist traps can be avoided by choosing an interesting itinerary and excursions. I love just being on the ocean and find it relaxing in quiet areas just watching the water. Story 42. Meh. Never fancied it. Maybe when I am properly old and wrinkly, I will change my mind, but I prefer doing my own thing. Story 43. My entire family loves them, but I do not see the appeal. We already live in Florida near the water, so what can I get on a cruise that I do not already have here? I would rather rent a cabin in the mountains and go hiking. Story 44. It's convenient, sure, but it is jam-packed with tourists who think they can do whatever they want because they are on vacation. It pollutes the environment significantly. You might be upset about having to use paper straws, but consider these impacts. When multiple cruise ships dock and disembark at a location, it is like a swarm that engulfs a town and its locals, leaving trash and damage behind. This is one of the major concerns of over-tourism. I have been on 2 cruises in the past, and my parents go on about 2 every year. They are only going to get bigger, include more inconsiderate people, and make things worse. Thank you for listening to my rant. Story 45. I love that you can go to multiple places for the same cost as a mid-level hotel while not having to worry about transportation, food, and their expenses. I get to boat away 95% of the stress of a vacation. Story 46. I used to really love them on the smaller ships where you could get to know the cruise staff and other passengers, and the food was really special. But now the ships are so huge and have so many people on board, I feel like a member of the herd. Obviously, times have changed. The cruise lines would not be building these huge vessels if they were not what the customers wanted. But they are just not for me. Story 47. I was pressured into going on a cruise in my mid-20s with some friends, and it was a pretty mediocre experience. You are basically stuck on a floating average hotel with a bunch of older retirees and families with young children. It felt like we were the only group in our 20s. You get to leave the boat for a few hours at a time, but it seemed like it would have been better to just fly to a location and actually spend time there rather than spending most of your time wandering around a boat with uninspiring activities and average food. Even the casino was disappointing since it was obviously rigged. For example, the video blackjack machine dealt blackjack 11 times out of 15 hands when we were playing, which I am quite sure is statistically impossible. The table games with human dealers were likely fairer, but they had ridiculously high minimum bets that were not suitable for casual play. I am not eager to go on another cruise anytime soon. Story 48. Honestly, I have never been one for open waters, so cruises are a definite no for me. I do not know, I know the chances are low for a cruise ship to sink, but it is never zero, and I am not willing to risk my chance on a critical failure. No, I refuse. Story 49. They are okay. They are really good for people with mobility and dietary restrictions as the experience can be somewhat catered. I prefer backpacking, but if your idea of a vacation is to drink a beer, lay down in the sun, be somewhat social, and then go on an excursion every other day, then it is probably what you are looking for. I like the fancy dinners, and I usually would not see my family until then as I hung out with other people. Story 50. I was just on a cruise as an adult back in May. I loved it. It was a themed charter cruise, so there were activities. I almost wish it was not, as it would have opened up more areas. Overall, it was just nice to relax. Story 51. Unpack once. Your hotel travels to different countries. You decide how active you want to be. You can be social or keep to yourself. Enjoy Las Vegas shows at night and great food. Story 52. Love them, but the time of year makes a big difference. We never go in the summer when the children are out of school. No way. Story 53. I went on a trip to the Caribbean and didn't like it. As soon as I stepped off the boat, I was hounded by islanders to buy things. Leave me alone, I am on vacation. Story 54. There are generally better ways to spend your money. The most memorable parts of my one and only cruise were the buffet foods and trying my first beer in Mexico, which I did not like because it was Corona. A beer I maintain is awful. Story 55. Dislike because I do not like the view of the ocean. The sunsets are nice, but during the day, it is just blue. Also, you are on a ship with thousands of strangers. No thank you. Story 56. I'm honestly scared to go on one. I am afraid I have the same fear as my dad, who panics if he cannot see land. Story 57. I generally like them. I took a Mediterranean cruise last fall, and it was great except for the COVID-19 situation. It is not a deep dive into any stop, but it is a sampler to let you know if you ever want to come back. Story 58. They are fine if you like the destinations. I say it is fine every few years if you just want to relax. Not every vacation needs to be uncovering some ancient ruins only 1% of tourists ever see. This may be a hot take of mine. Story 59. I have only been on one as a child, but I really enjoyed it. Granted, it was on a ship that would be considered small by today's standards. The large floating resorts look exhausting, but the smaller ships seem like they could be enjoyable. Story 60. It depends on where you go. I did one in Alaska that I enjoyed because I visited places I would not have seen otherwise. I would never do a long cruise or short stops in cities that I would visit on my own. Story 61. I did a 7-day Caribbean cruise and I loved it. It never felt crowded to me, and I am a very solitary person. Story 62. I like small boutique cruises and stay away from anything with thousands of people on them. I will not go on the larger ones as I find they have more illness and overcrowding overall. When you add everything up, it is not a cheap vacation, and I do not find it relaxing. Also, many people let their kids run wild, misbehaving at every turn, the pool area, the restaurant. But for some, they love it and do not have a problem spending lots of money in the process. I guess for a family, it is probably cheaper than a few days at Disney, as that has become very expensive. I think a lot of people charge these vacations and pay them off over a few years. Story 63. As long as politicians and industry leaders hop onto private jets and yachts to get to World Economic Forum summits or climate summits, dining on premium Wagyu exclusively flown in from Japan while telling others to cut back on climate-harming consumption, I could not care less. Personally, the idea of a cruise sounds a bit boring. Story 64. The food was really good. For the amount of money spent, I could have just bought backpacks and plane tickets to Nassau and had a more interesting time. However, it was for my brother-in-law's birthday, and the tickets were free, so the total cost was close to $3,000. Story 65. I will try one when I am too old to do things by myself. Cruises do not appeal to me, but I am still curious about them. Story 66. I went on a big family holiday with almost 30 people. It was fun just having everyone together for the week. I did not care for most of the stops. I typically backpack to all my destinations, so it was nice to have a holiday where I could sit around and do nothing. Story 67. Just got off our second cruise for our 10-year anniversary. We went with Royal Caribbean on a Southern Caribbean itinerary on an older, mid-sized ship. For us, it was amazing. The ship was a great size since we do not like giant crowds. We still avoided the buffet but did not have a lot of issues doing that. The ports were great. Curacao, Aruba, the Dominican Republic, and Coco Cay. For the 3 actual ports, we rented a car on our own and swam with sea turtles, took a 4-wheel drive tour to Conchi, a giant tide pool that we snorkeled in, and took a tour to Bahia de Los Aguilas, a pristine beach in a national park, respectively. The tours were through third-party local companies, not for price, but because we could not do those activities through the cruise tours. We are semi-adventurous and never felt uncomfortable or unsafe doing them. I also planned a couple of hours at the end to ensure we would get back on the ship in plenty of time. All three of us loved the entire experience and did not want it to end. We had spent a few days in Florida beforehand, but if we had to do it again, we might want to just do a longer cruise. Yes, we splurged for this trip since we were celebrating, and it was not as cheap as I could have planned it. If we cruised regularly, I would cut costs in a number of areas to make it manageable. Story 68. I'm going on my fourth cruise next week. The first three received a thumbs up. I like the coastal atmosphere on cruises. I live far inland. Sitting on the windy deck and scanning for whales is fun for me. All-inclusive options are not any cheaper. Story 69. Honestly, I would love to go on a cruise once. Recently, I went on one of those organized bus trips. While I had to be talked into it and had a pretty hard time the morning we left because I slept terribly, it was a lot of fun. Story 70. Does not really interest me, but then again, the idea of an all-inclusive resort did not really interest me until I stayed at one, so who knows. Story 71. On smaller ships with larger costs, it is amazing. I went to Antarctica on Seabourn, and every day and night was unforgettable. I am fairly certain that is as close to heaven as I will ever get. I like cruising on smaller ships because you are on a moving hotel with all the amenities. The gyms are good, the entertainment varies, and the people with you are full of life stories. You should understand that we only started cruising after we had traveled on our own to many wonderful and foreign lands first. Story 72. We did a Great Lakes cruise on a small ship, and it was wonderful. I want to cruise the Mississippi River with the same company. Story 73. I have been on several. I had great times and one bad time. The boats are typically so big that overcrowding is not really a problem. There is always something to do, and everything is pretty much at your fingertips. The best thing, though, is all the workers on board are not American. They are always super nice with a friendly smile. My wife and I tip very well because of this. Story 74. I have been on 2 cruises. One was to Mexico from California and one to Alaska from Seattle. That is enough for me. There were too many people to relax at all. Every part of the ship was crowded, and obnoxiously drunk people ruined any attempt to just relax. I got sick after each one with a head cold. I was seasick all day during the day at sea. The excursions were not fun because there were too many people, and it was too regimented to enjoy where we went. Overall, it was not an enjoyable experience. All-inclusive resorts are the same way, in my opinion. I would rather just pick a location, get a hotel or rental house, and enjoy the destination at my own pace and on my own terms. Plus, I prefer exotic locations, and not many cruises go to Iowa. Story 75. You tend to miss out on the nightlife in different areas, but you get to do fun activities during the day on shore. Story 76. I've never been on one. Would love to go. Some of my family has been on many. I admit that I get jealous at times. I have nothing but good opinions about them from what I read and heard. Story 77. I have been on 2 cruises in my life. It is exponentially better if you have a room with a balcony. While I enjoyed the 2 cruises I went on, I probably would not go on another one unless my wife really wanted to. Story 78. Cruise ships are like the Greyhound bus of the seas, offering overpriced and mediocre food. There is not enough time at destinations, so passengers are limited to low-quality tourist traps. Norovirus is common, and if you become sick or injured, the cost of treatment is exorbitant compared to intensive care unit care. Story 79. Absolutely love them. I have been on a couple, and they are always fun. I end up getting the drink packages each time, and it is nice to just wander, look at the ocean, be catered to, and just relax. Story 80. What I discovered about cruising is that I really like it when the ship is going somewhere. I am not a big fan of stopping at some small island where everyone is trying to sell me low-quality products. We have done 3 transatlantic cruises and several others in the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean. Story 81. I think they are a waste of money. I would rather someone try to harm me tubing on a lake. I also have a fear of it sinking and being in the middle of the ocean like Rose from Titanic. To be honest, that movie is probably why I will never go into oceans on a boat. Story 82. There are luxury cruises, then there is everything else. Most people who criticize cruises have not had the opportunity to try a luxury one, which can offer exceptional value for your money. That said, the environmental impact is something to consider. Story 83. I have been on 36 ocean cruises to many locations, and I love them. For me, it is time to do something else. There were very few problems on any of them. Story 84. I went on a family trip, my first and very last cruise. I'm not usually much of a people person, but I went anyway. The thing that bothered me the most was the fake port where I was constantly pressured to purchase unnecessary items, paying a premium for extras like excursions, which mostly involved requests for tips or donations. There were many fake props on the ship for taking pictures, and each was very expensive. Felt like a fake town on water. Story 85. One of the biggest sources of ocean pollution is comparable to shooting polar bears and destroying coral reefs. Story 86. I see many responses about cruises that sound like Disney or Mediterranean. What do people think about Alaskan cruises, where the focus is on the view? Story 87. Been on 2 boats, not by my choice. The second I can't see any land, I panic. Being surrounded by nothing but deep ocean is not for me. I love the water and the beach, but no. Story 88. Not a fan. I have been on 3 of them and they are not for me. I do not like the feeling of being stuck or trapped on something, especially in the middle of the ocean. Story 89. Fantastic value for what you get. Also, the ability to be completely unreachable without great expense cannot be overstated. I have only been on 2, but the feeling of throwing my cell phone in the room safe and not touching it all week was amazing. Story 90. Do not go on cruises. I was a tanker mate for a while. You do not belong out there. You are not trained. We invented airplanes for a reason. Do not be a fool. Story 91. I love them. Once you pay, everything is basically taken care of except for anything you buy in ports or at shops on the ships. Food, a place to stay, and transportation between destinations are included. I think the idea of a resort in the middle of the ocean is cool, and the views are great, as are the amenities depending on the ship. It is also a great way to see multiple destinations. I really like using the gyms on the ships. Story 92. Loud, crowded, and overrun with children and buffet-style food is not my idea of a vacation. Now, a cruise like Windstar Cruises, for example, which is small, quiet, well-staffed, children-free, a 100% must-have requirement, and focused on sightseeing and leisure, restaurant and bar quality food, and luxury amenities, not Las Vegas-style glitchy shows and activities, is more my thing. Story 93. Once I saw the environmental impact summarized, I decided I would never take a cruise. It is horrible for the planet, worse than private jets. Story 94. I'm not a fan of cruises. I travel a lot and usually stay in one place for a while to really get the feel of the place. Cruises can't offer me that. I usually cook my own food, so I rent a homestay with a kitchen. I have a bias against people who do bucket list trips, checking off Instagram moments so they can tell their friends rather than truly immersing themselves in another country's culture. Most cruises are huge hotels on the water. I took a week's cruise once around the Dalmatian coast in Croatia, but the ship had only 17 cabins for a maximum of 34 passengers. That was good. However, walking through Dubrovnik crowded with other cruise passengers who only had 3 hours to explore was frustrating. This isn't travel. It's like cattle being herded from one place to another because people don't want the joy of planning their own travel. Story 95. Not all cruises, cruise lines, and cruise destinations are the same. There are large commercial cruise ships, such as Carnival, Norwegian, Virgin, Royal Caribbean, and Disney. They are all very different from each other. I have been on smaller private chartered cruises with 10 to 20 people. These are usually tailored specifically for the guests that attend, such as co-ed scuba groups or gay men clothing optional, and they are also very different from each other. In general, I have had positive experiences with all the many different types of cruises that are available, for very different reasons. Story 96. A sailboat with up to 5 people would be great. A floating Las Vegas hotel filled with a bunch of strangers that you cannot get away from is not for me, especially considering the petri dish-like nature of the disease environment. Story 97. 2 years ago, I went on an Alaskan cruise and hated it. This year, I went on an Antarctic cruise, and it was absolutely amazing. Maybe because the ship only had 106 guests compared to thousands on the Alaskan cruise. Story 98. I want to, but the environmental cost is too high. There is too much food waste and people often end up getting sick. Story 99. It is just not for me. I prefer not to be corralled onto a ship with a group of others. Destination flights work best for me because I can do whatever I want, whenever I want, while immersing myself in the local culture and supporting the local economy. No all-inclusive either. Story 100. I love them. I went to Alaska and the Mediterranean. I think it is a great way to see multiple locations. The food is great, and the entertainment is generally good. The only thing I do not like is that you are limited to coastal locations unless you are at port for multiple days, which I do not know if that ever happens. Story 101. I have never been on a cruise ship. I don't really have an interest. I grew up around boats and near the ocean. Nothing huge like cruise ships. The closest I came was working on a 100-foot yacht for a summer and an 80-foot fishing boat for another summer. But I guess I just don't quite get the idea of a cruise. I feel like an actual resort is better than a cruise ship. You spend a lot of time at sea where things can go wrong. They are centers for disease transmission. You are essentially trapped. Story 102. I love them. I went on one and knew the right time is during the fall when all the children are back in school. While the cruise ship had children on board, I could count them on one hand, and they were well behaved. Story 103. Been to 4. Never want to do it again. I just do not enjoy them, and they are always packed with people. Lines for everything are always terrible. Story 104. I love cruises. I am a business owner, and when I go on a cruise, I leave my cell phone at home. Here is a tip to avoid illness. For the first 36 hours, eat every meal or snack in the dining room. Story 105. Absolutely hated it. It was even free for me. I was invited along with a friend, and we went to Canada and Alaska. The time offshore was great. Alaska was beautiful and Canada was great. The time on the ship felt like a prison. Lines were everywhere. The food was mediocre. The activities were rather boring. I couldn't wait to get off and walk around somewhere that was not the ship. Story 106. It comes down to the kind of cruise experience you want. Some cruise routes are designed for partying and having a good time, such as many Caribbean cruises. Others focus more on exploring different locations and countries, like Mediterranean and European cruises. Still, some are for relaxing and taking in the views, such as Alaskan cruises. That is not to say you will not find partiers on an Alaskan cruise. Just keep in mind that whatever your preference, choose one that best matches the experience you want, and you will have a great time. Story 107. No. I am not paying for 2 people just to sail alone. I do not want to pay gratuity ahead only to pay again on the ship. Princess charged me $6,000 just to sail alone. I am not accepting this situation. Story 108. I have been on a trip down the west coast of the United States into Canada. It was more enjoyable than I expected. We are going to the Caribbean in December. Story 109. A cruise staff member once said to me, "There are 3 types on cruises: newlyweds, overfed, and almost dead." Story 110. It is good if you want a vacation where everything is taken care of for you. Your meals, lodging, activities, and entertainment. It also provides a safe and basic introduction to new experiences. If you want to explore freely or delve deeper into a destination, you might want to try something else. We returned to one of our port destinations on a separate vacation for several days, and it was my favorite vacation spot, except on the day when the cruise ships arrived. Story 111. Not my thing, but I did enjoy the 2 cruises I went on. California to Mexico. Lots of spring breakers, but it was pretty low-key. Alaska. This was good. My parents wanted to do it, so we went. We were only on the boat all day for 2 days out of a full week trip. The highlight was Victoria Island and seeing Butchert Gardens. Alaska was nice too. That was years ago. Now, I would just go to the place I want to visit. Right now, I think I would only book a cruise if we were in a recession. Story 112. I would not do one. Being trapped until the end of the trip, even if you want to get off, sounds claustrophobic. I am not a fan of the ocean anyway. Story 113. I just did my first cruise ever in Alaska last month. I was not a fan. Aside from realizing I definitely get seasick, it just wasn't a great experience. The food options were, at best, equivalent to high-end microwave meals. Despite having many different food choices, very little of it was good. You can pay extra for finer dining options, which are decent, but they don't justify the cruise itself. Unless you are an alcoholic or gambler, there really isn't much to do on the boat. There are some shows in the evenings like stand-up comedy and trivia, but that only lasts about an hour. You then still have the rest of your day to walk in circles on the decks. If you're into relaxing and sunbathing on the top deck, that's fine. That just isn't how I like to vacation. Lastly, the excursions are very rushed. You have a few hours ashore no matter where you go. If you do any excursion packages, they will feel rushed because you have to get off the ship, take transportation, do the activity, return by transportation, and go through security to reboard. All in 3 to 4 hours. I like photography, and this time restriction is not ideal for that hobby. That said, it just wasn't for me. Some people I went with really enjoyed it. I'm indifferent. I randomly won a second cruise in November while I was on this trip, and I'm just not interested in going. Story 114. Many of my friends really like them. I'm not a big fan. It is just a big sterile environment with forced smiles and excessive eating and drinking. I would rather experience some culture, walk through a city, and feel the vibe of the place than be anesthetized in a soulless utopia. Story 115. It should be illegal to emit so much carbon dioxide for just a holiday. It does not sound like fun either. So no thanks. Story 116. I really enjoyed it. I like getting away, and I like that it is a small community for a few days. As long as you enjoy meeting new people and doing activities, it is good. Story 117. I don't much like cruises to the Caribbean. The islands are much the same and it becomes redundant. What I like about cruises is using them as a tasting menu for a region I have not visited. I have been to 20 places in the Mediterranean and 30 places around South America because of cruises. Now I return to those I really enjoyed and skip those I did not. I hope to do a circumnavigation cruise around Japan, then go for a long vacation there once I know what I really want to experience. The cruise ship is a bubble, though. You won't get the genuine local experience anywhere, but you can get a sense of the places. Story 118. No thanks. I'm terrified of the deep, open ocean. And at night, forget it. It's like being trapped in a floating city. Everything is so expensive. My son just went on one, not by choice, his girlfriend's family reunion, and they charged for every little thing. Internet access was $35 a day. You barely have time to explore the places you stop at because you only have about 6 hours or so. Feels like a petri dish. A river cruise. Now I'd be willing to try one of those. I can see land, and there aren't thousands of people on it. To add about river cruises, they offer a more intimate experience, with fewer passengers and more time to enjoy the scenery and local culture. The pace is slower, making it easier to relax and really take in each destination. Story 119. I am indifferent towards them, and as someone who does not enjoy traveling, I expect being on a cruise is the type of travel I would enjoy the least. I have no plans to go on one in my life and would turn down a cruise even if all expenses were paid and it did not cost me time off or anything else from missing work. It is simply not my preference at all. Story 120. I finally went on a cruise at the end of the pandemic with my family and my brother's family. It was a good time, but I am not sure the places we visited are places I would have on my list. We went on the cruise not because it was convenient to the places we wanted to visit. That is the important point for me. Pick places you want to go to and then, if it is convenient, take a cruise there. Story 121. The best way to travel for a large group, such as a family gathering with 10 or more people, is actually quite convenient. Story 122. It seems like an effective way to get stuck on a boat and then have coronavirus disease spread rapidly. Humans can be unpleasant creatures. Story 123. Bump for visibility. I have never been on one. Is the internet connection solid? Can you work properly and remotely from the ship when it is in open waters? Story 124. Tendrían que desaparecer. Parecen personas que inundan las ciudades por unas horas. Turismo de baja calidad. Story 125. Went on a cruise from New York to New England and Atlantic Canada. It was great until two of the ports I was looking forward to the most were skipped due to a storm. It was also unfortunate that we caught the influenza virus and experienced high fever, which caused us to miss an excursion in Cape Breton that I was really looking forward to. Many elderly passengers were coughing without covering their mouths in the buffet and concert venue. One night, someone visibly ill was in line for dinner. That was probably where we contracted the influenza virus. I would love to go on another cruise, hopefully with better luck. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.